Hello and welcome back to the podcast. So today I want to talk to you about those Sunday scaries or the back to school scaries or the back to work worries as some people call them. But before we do, I just want to quickly say thank you because it has again been a while. In fact, I think it's been 5 or 6 weeks since we've done an episode. And over the past couple of months, life and work and everything really have all been a little bit hectic here. All good stuff for the most part, but still hectic nonetheless. And so unfortunately, as is often the case, the podcast and the weekly newsletter have had to be the things that have taken a bit of a back seat. And I've managed to get the odd email and the odd episode out every now and then, but nothing like our usual sort of schedule. So before we get started, I just want to say thank you for still being here, for still listening to today's episode, and for already making it through this introduction. So thank you. Thank you again for being here. And I really hope it is useful. And if you find it useful, pass it on to a colleague who might also find it really helpful. So let's talk about it then. That feeling that rears its head just before we go back to school, it's a bit like a shadow that looms over us from the back of our brain, right? There's that sudden heaviness in the pit of your stomach. There's sometimes a dark sense of dread that kind of comes over you like a cloud. And as I say, some call it the back to school scaries. A client of mine calls it the work worries. And whatever you know it as, you know the feeling, right? It sits, it sulks, it kind of stews in your stomach, and it's so hard for us to move past, especially at the start of a new school year. And on this weekend, more than any other, us teachers and school staff, we're often split into two camps, right? Some of us are sharing photos of our new planners and emailing others to ask about inset, or maybe we whip out the laptop just for a little bit to finish off a few final bits that are outstanding. And then there's those in the other camp, and this is the camp that I was often part of. We are comparing ourselves and our cluttered classrooms to the beautifully curated ones that we're seeing on social media. The ping and the ding of our email app is sending shivers down our spines, and it almost feels like our laptops are sort of stalking us, right? They're sort of sulking behind the sofa, catching our eyes with their seemingly somewhat judgmental gaze for not picking them up earlier. And maybe you're not, maybe you're somewhere in the middle and you've got traits of both. But whoever you are, however you feel at this time of year, we know that this final weekend of the summer tends to stir up a lot of thoughts and a lot of emotions. There's stress, there's worry, fear, maybe excitement, anxiety, overwhelm, maybe there's anticipation, sadness, and sometimes we can even feel grief. We're losing the summer, we're losing a routine, a lifestyle that we have had for the past 6 weeks, and things are going to change. And for some people, that's for the better. Some people, we might feel like it's for the worse. But grief is a funny one, and it's something we don't think enough about, really. The thing is, though, our brain doesn't really know, as we have said multiple times in the podcast, the brain doesn't really know the difference between worry and danger, and it reacts the same way ultimately. When you imagine that email coming through from SLT or that pile of marking that's going to be on your desk by Friday, your body almost behaves like there's a saber-toothed tiger in front of you, right? It's just walked into the room, it's eyeing you up. The heart rate goes up, we might experience shallow breathing, the brain is flooded with adrenaline and then maybe cortisol, and that's our biology doing its job. But we know that biology doesn't always help us when the threat is just a laptop or a to-do list. So today I want to share with you 3 very, very simple steps and a 3-step framework that you can use today, this evening, you can use going into this week as well, or any weekend, in fact, to help you manage that back to school scaries sort of feeling. And I call it the 3 C's. So there's calm, there's clarity, and there's certainty. And each stage is about helping you work alongside your brain and your body and your central nervous system rather than fighting against them, which is what we often try to do. So first of all, let's start with calm. As it says on the tin, the first step here is about bringing your brain, your breathing, and your blood pressure back down to a state of calm and equilibrium. When we're stressed, as we know as teachers, the fight, flight, freeze, fawn system, if you like, kicks in. And that's your sympathetic nervous system that floods your body with adrenaline. And that's why your stomach can sometimes feel knotted. Sometimes your shoulders creep towards your ears and you get neck ache and shoulder ache, and maybe a headache for good measure. But the good news here is that our parasympathetic nervous system, sometimes called our rest and digest, has a built-in calm button, if you like. And we can press that by slowing our body down, by managing our breathing and our movements too. So some simple ways that we can do that. First and foremost, like I say, literally simply slowing yourself down, slowing down your movements, slowing down your speech, taking a breath, slowing down your breathing. It really does work wonders for us. So you can try walking around the house, half speed if you like. And it sounds silly, but this is going to communicate to your brain that it's okay. We're not in danger. Even something as subtle as our eyes not moving so rapidly around the room, that helps to reduce adrenaline and cortisol, and it helps to increase serotonin. So it's a calming effect on our brains and bodies. And then we can start to think maybe about mindfulness. And I like to think of mindfulness as just your mind being full of one thing. So that could be sitting down with a coffee, it could be watching the clouds, it could be listening to a piece of music, it could just be doing a puzzle with your little one or playing with your little one. The key bit here is that we are not trying to do 10 things at once, right? It could even be having a shower, brushing your teeth, doing the washing up. It's about focusing purely on one thing as much as we possibly can. Mindfulness isn't about clearing your mind and thinking about nothing. It's about being present with that one thing. And then thirdly and finally then, to help us calm, we can think about breath work. We know that when we enter a heightened state, our breathing is often the first thing to change, but we can also reverse engineer our physical state, if you like, by managing our breath. So really simply, the most basic version of this I can give you is breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, and just try to make your exhales, your out breaths, a little bit longer than your in breath. And you could do box breathing if you wanted to go a bit deeper with it. You could do the hand model of breathing. You could use the physiological side. There's so many different strategies and techniques we could use. But to really simplify it, in through the nose, out through the mouth, make the exhale a little bit longer than the inhale. And even just a few rounds of this can move you from that wired feeling to feeling quite focused and calm and steady, basically. And a client of mine calls this her cup of calm. She doesn't just wait for 33 minutes to block out time to regulate herself. She'll take 90 seconds or so, and she just grabs the drink, she just breathes, she feels her shoulders drop, she takes that moment, and she feels more grounded. The last thing we want to do, which is what we often do, is rush around for the next few days, panicking, feeling flustered, heightening ourselves, and making a tough day even tougher by doing so. So let's just take that first step of calming. The next thing we're going to think about, the second C, is clarity. And again, we're trying to work with your brain here and give it a bit more of what it needs right now, because we know that a messy, muddled mind with a million thoughts flying around is going to feel overwhelming, and it's going to feel very dangerous. Remember, this is our threat response. It's going to feel very dangerous to our brains. And this, in essence, is because our prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that's responsible for decision making, basically gets hijacked by our amygdala, which you can think of as almost like your threat scanner, if you like. Bit of a simplification there, but you can think of it as your radar for danger. When our stress gets high, when we're moving around, when we're trying to do a lot of things at once, when we've got a lot on our mind, that prefrontal cortex becomes disengaged. And suddenly, when that happens, even the smallest of tasks can feel enormous. So the antidote here is that clarity, as I say. The first step with clarity that I find works really, really well is just a mind dump. And it's the oldest one in the book, but it is one of the best for a reason. And the most effective way I've found to do this is to grab yourself a big piece of paper and simply write and write and write. And try to keep it on one side of a large piece of paper. That's why I said large. Try and keep it on one piece of paper rather than 5 different notebook pages, because we're trying to see things here as one clear picture. We're not trying to flick and again, get flustered and flitter between different pages. We're just trying to see it as one clear picture. Your brain loves an external hard drive. It's like you're dumping out. It's like you're creating a second brain. It's like a storage box for your thoughts. And once you've mind dumped, you're likely to feel a bit more in control anyway. But if you want to take it to the next level, you can start to think of categorizing these things. So some people like to then group these items, these tasks, these thoughts, whatever they might be, by highlighting them or putting them under a subheading on a fresh piece of paper. And again, this just further helps the brain feel like, okay, this goes here, that goes there. I know where everything lives. I know where I stand. And it starts to create that sense of safety, which is what we want. My favorite, though, to give you a third step, my favorite thing to do is to use a timeline. So you could take that mind dump if you wanted to, particularly the tasks and the deadlines, and you could draw a line across the middle of a piece of paper, and you can start to create this timeline, because our brains aren't great at conceptualizing time. Like, if you think about it, The start of the summer holidays felt like what, like yesterday, last week? But we're not great at thinking about the past or the future, and that's why we can get ourselves in a bit of a muddle. But by drawing that line across the middle of the page, we can plot some key dates, some tasks, some deadlines, like I say, and we're going to give our brains this real visual representation of time that it can actually work with. And suddenly you can see that not everything needs to be done before the children come back. Not everything needs to be done before inset. You can start to see that, all right, I can sort of, delay a few things and I can put things in their boxes, and you'll feel that certainty and that control. And I sometimes say to my clients, think of your brain a little bit like a cluttered desk. We've all been there, right? Clarity is about just us finding just enough, tidying just enough so you can actually see the desk underneath. And that helps us to create that clarity. Third and final step then is going to be certainty, because the number one cause of anxiety is the unknown. There's that phrase of fear is false evidence appearing real, if you like things like that. But anxiety is about the unknown, really. And it presents to our brain a little bit like, for all intents and purposes, a little bit like 1,000 mini saber-toothed tigers coming over the hill. It's scary for the brain. It's frightening, which is why we go into this stress response. And it's why most of us don't like the dark at night, or we don't like strange noises in the house once everyone's in bed. It's unknown, it's scary. Because it could be danger, it heightens us. So we've got a few ideas to help you kind of create that certainty and that predictability this week. The main one, which I'll keep banging on about, is this idea of the circles of control. And unfortunately, we can't be sure of everything. We can't be certain of everything. That is life. And some things are naturally outside our circle of control and even outside our circle of influence. These are, the things that are completely outside of control. They fall into our circle of concern. They worry us, they play on our mind, but we literally cannot do anything about them. However, just knowing where things sit, is it in my control? Can I influence it? Am I concerned about it, but can't do anything about it? Just knowing where they sit can help us feel a little bit more steady and a little bit more in control. Write them down, circle them, and do what you can to let go of that concern pile. So circles of control, really important. Talking about that idea of circles of control, something that is definitely within our control is helping ourselves to get set up. Think about what is within your circle of control. Could you pack your bag? Could you prep your breakfast? Could you take your car around the corner and fill it up with petrol for the morning? Could you revise your lesson plans? Could you quickly flick through your presentation if you're leading an inset session? Could you just make sure the photocopying is done? Could you, communicate the plan for the rest of the week with the family, maybe? What's for dinner? Who's taking the kids to club? Whatever it might be. These small steps are going to signal safety to our brains. There are definitely, some things that you could do this evening before you go to bed and that you could do first thing in the morning that is going to help your day to run smoother. And then that leads us on really nicely to our third and final step of creating certainty. And that is to, and bear with me here, visualize the outcome. Now, I'm not asking you to hope and wish your way to like a stress-free life or anything like that, or to wait for the vibrations of the universe to dump something positive into your lap. But we know the power of mental rehearsal. It is now very, very well researched. We've got athletes like Kobe Bryant. He used to use mental rehearsal absolutely religiously. Michael Phelps talks all the time about using mental rehearsal. There's a story about how he had practiced a specific race so many times that when he dove in the pool and his goggles came off, he could literally swim the race. He's not running the race, is he? Complete the race, whatever it is, completely through muscle memory, because he had when to turn, when to breathe, because he couldn't see, but he had learned the entire race through mental rehearsal. And the reason that this works is because the brain isn't great at telling between reality and imagination. So if you can positively visualize your September start, if you can walk through it in your mind like a movie, particularly if you're leading an inset or you've got a new class or you're working with a colleague who maybe you've got to rebuild a relationship with, or you're new to the school or something like that, you're going to arrive calmer because your nervous system almost believes you've really done it before. And I know that sounds a bit ridiculous, but it is literally training your brain. You're creating pathways. It's almost muscle memory. It's like you've done it before. And this is especially great if you're worried at all that you, like so many of us are, that you've forgotten how to do your job over the summer. If you can run through that day thinking about the best possible outcome, that will really, really help. So there we have it. 3 steps to help you create calm, clarity, and certainty as we get geared up to go into the new school year. And I know some people have already been back to school in the UK with their inset days. I know some of us have got their children coming in tomorrow, but most of us, I think, across the country are having their inset days over the next sort of 2 or 3 days. I know other listeners over in Dubai, in Thailand, in Australia, in the US. I know you've got very different term times to us here in the UK, but wherever you are, whether it is just going back to work on a Monday, wherever you are starting a new academic year, I really do hope that these tips have been helpful. And although you absolutely do not need it, good luck for your first few days back. I know it feels like you've never done it before. I know it feels overwhelming and scary, but hopefully this will help you to create some calm this evening, some clarity going into this new week, and some certainty as you get started. Anyway, take care, and I'll see you back here for the next episode.